here, reverb or?
You might not on your sound
Okay.
reaction.
All right, well, let's get started. It's 3:37, 3:36 on there. So I never started. We got a hard stop at 5:30. So you have to keep me on track because I will talk till 9. So by myself, I'll be sitting here talking till 9.
I'll be.
All right. Did everybody get a handout? Get signed in? So there's a sign-in sheet up here, handouts. If you're not keen on paper, that's fine. These are also on our website. And so if at the end of the day you say, yep, I'm good, I don't have any notes on it, you can just kick it back and I'll take them with me and use them the next time if you want to find them on our website. We're in the process of trying to redo our website, so it's not the most easy electronic format to navigate. I apologize. I don't even know where to find them on our website, so good luck. But meanwhile, we have a paper copy for you. So, welcome. Thank you for being here. This training, I believe, is for city, primarily city, but also county folks are invited. So we do this, it's shared. So we do this every 6 months or so. We come to Missoula and either the county hosts or the city hosts. So I guess the fall is the city hosting and in the spring it's the county, but we're glad you're here. So if you're here for a board training, you're in the right spot. If you're not, I don't know where else you should be going. My name's Dan Clark. I'm the director of the Local Government Center at Montana State University. So our center works with local governments all over the state. We work primarily with cities, counties, and special districts. And we do a lot of training for all the different boards around that are appointed by these cities and counties to help administer the work with local governments. So hopefully all you are here in anticipation of learning something about the governance side and what are the rules and what are our responsibilities as a board to ensure that we are compliant with the state laws. So we're doing all the things properly, which then allows you to focus on the reason why you're convening a meeting. Right? I'd much rather have you spend your energy on doing the thing that you've been appointed to do. And if you can make the process of meeting and gathering and managing those meetings effective, then it gives you more bandwidth to do the thing that you're jazzed about doing. No one likes to spend 2 years working on bylaws. Just saying, unless you do, good for you. But you know, if you had bylaws, it makes that governing so much easier. Anyway, that's kind of the idea of the training. We've got basically a little less than 2 hours to cover whatever you are taking time out of your day to be here. You may feel compelled to be here, requirement or whatever, but I also want to make this valuable and meaningful for you. So the way I like to do these trainings, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, and you're welcome. For me, a PowerPoint means I know what you need, what your interests are. And so I've already predetermined with my 4,800 slides, this is what we're going to talk about today. Rather, I want to say, what are your questions and concerns? We'll make a list and that will be our agenda. This packet's big. It's heavy with the Montana Code annotated. I want to connect you with what does the law say. So if you have a question about, oh, how do we notice our meetings? Well, let's read about what the law says. And then you say, okay, now how do we make sure our board is consistent with what the law said? So we'll make those connections. We can talk about this is what others do and how to go about accomplishing that. But really, so what are the questions, concerns you have? Make that list. That'll be our agenda. And then we'll just go through systematically addressing those questions. And it's pretty informal. You got questions, you want to discuss things, drill into it more, we're happy to do that as long as we're out here at 5:30. So I think that's all for the housekeeping. Bathrooms are around the corner if you need to find them. Yeah, food up here. There are cookies, which I understand are horrible. I wouldn't eat them. So just, yeah, I'd stay away from the cookies. All the rest is fine. The cookies, stay away. We'll take care of them afterwards. Wink, wink. Anyway, so with that, let's start with what are the topics or issues that you would like to make sure we spend our time talking about today so you feel more confident with providing the service to your community. Okay, so
Is there a code of ethics for it?
oh yes, so put it there.
30 of ethics.
I got current handwriting, but you can decipher. Where else I saw here?
What are some mistakes commonly made, even if they were well-intentioned?
Oh.
Or maybe not well-intentioned?
We only have 2 hours.
Sorry. Yeah, so we'll just put mistakes. We'll kind of talk that, but yeah.
What is the information required in minutes?
I
I've
don't know.
seen some organizations do like a summary, some it's like a word for word.
Okay, we'll talk about minutes.
Best practices for roles and responsibilities between city staff and the board members, like setting your agenda. And also if the board has working groups, if there are any recommendations for roles for that as well.
So, you have minute, what did you say, agendas and,
Yeah.
well, when we get there, just remind me.
I'm curious how much power boards actually have.
Okay, anything else?
Yeah, I would like to get a good understanding of what is exactly required of a board during a meeting, and then what are some things that boards do that are above and beyond that, recommended but not required under statute or the Constitution.
How to gracefully and lawfully limit public comment.
Okay, public comment, that'd be good. Any about just meetings in general, what constitutes a meeting? Yeah, we'll cover it. Let's start just meetings in general.
His mic is.
Oh, God.
Do you need this louder
No. I
Okay.
was just making sure.
or less than? Or that? That's a good list. It's a good start. If we can just decipher that in another 20 minutes, that'd be great too. So context, let's start big. So we'll start big and we'll start narrowing down to some of these things specific. I think it's helpful at times for folks like yourselves that are volunteering your time for something that you are interested or passionate about, right? I want to serve in the library. I think you mentioned the library board. I'm really passionate about the library. I want to dedicate some of my discretionary effort in my life towards this cause. And so I want to make sure that time is well spent, but I'm also complying with the structure and framework that exists to for that role in society, right? So, so let me start with the very beginning, really broad brushstrokes for you to think about. Why is it that we create government? Other than to annoy us in our day-to-day lives. But why government? What is it?
Well, literally to govern, to make sure that we don't.
Well, you're doing this all night, yeah.
Engines have governors on them, okay, to make sure that they don't overheat. There are literally mechanisms that cause the engine to slow down if it's moving too fast, okay? So we have that literally to make sure that we don't get overheated and burn out.
Yeah. In a way, the way government is designed, intentionally is designed to be deliberative, contemplative. It's not designed to be efficient in getting something from A to B, right? So as you think about the business world, right, that's efficiency is really important, right? How do we get more widgets for less time, less money, and out to the market quicker, right? We're not in the widget business. We're in the business of bringing community together to mediate our differences. So we have designed a mechanism for us to come together and to provide essential services we can't get anywhere else. I like to say we create government to do things collectively that we can't do individually. Like if you look, I'm just looking down here, I can see a road. That road is collectively, a transportation system has collectively been designed for the efficient movement of goods and services around our community. And we've collectively pooled our resources together to fund that. And then we elect local folks to manage that local asset. So a water system, which you've recently acquired, right? So you have a water system, you've got a sewer system, you've got a solid waste collection process, right? So we're doing these things collectively, and you don't have a competitor, right? We're all pitching in to provide the service. You're all within this community owners of the water system, the sewer system, the transportation system. It's ours. And it's being funded through our taxes, fees, and assessments. Right? We're pitching it in the pool and say, here, use these resources, these financial resources to provide these services. And so as a board member, you're part of this larger infrastructure, human infrastructure that's designed to provide advice and support the decision-making body. We elect a legislative branch of government. We call it a commission or council here. What do you call it? Commission? City commission? Council. So you elect a council. Some communities are very particular about what you call it. So apparently, so you elect a city council. And that city council, what's the role of a legislative branch of government? So think back junior high civics class. To make the laws and the rules, right? The policies, laws, right? So that's the framework we're to be governed by. So they're the policy making. The executive branch, you have a mayor, elected mayor. What does the mayor do?
Carry them out.
Carries it out, right? And so we've got 9 commissioners, council members. Well, good for you. We've got 12 council members. I was just in New York last week working with their county there. Their counties have legislators. 39 elected legislators that serves a county of 3,000 or 300,000 people. So anyway, wow. It's like, how do you get anything done? Anyway, so you have a very complex, diverse community that you operate in. And we can't reasonably expect those 12 individuals that we elect to represent our interests and make decisions on our behalf to be experts in every facet and aspect of our community. So they create a whole nother structure of boards that are public in mind, that they're public boards to provide a specific focus on an area or interest. And you're going to delve into that, and you're going to provide a specific focus on that and give advice and counsel to the legislative body. You're going to help inform them. So you're out there engaging the public in a broader conversation about this very narrow area. I should have asked earlier, what all boards are being represented in the room here? We've got library board here.
Open Space Advisory Committee.
Open Space Advisory Committee. So it's an important, that's not anything you'll find, an open space board in the Montana Code, right? It's a creation of the local governing body saying, we need advice and support on how we're going to spend our bond funds, right? The money that we're getting to maintain open space. So we need that support because we can't, anyway, so that's your rule. Other things that are represented here, other boards.
Transportation.
Transportation district, right? So I'm talking about roads, right up your alley. More transportation. Anyway, planning board, affordable housing.
Bicycle pedestrian advisory.
I was just working with the city of Bozeman last week. I should be selling this, but I'm going to tell it anyway. They're parking, downtown parking, and they're talking about how much it costs to build parking spaces. You know what, it's probably the same here. Do you know what the cost is for one parking space to create a new parking space?
Where?
Anywhere, here or Bozeman. What do you think? $1,000? Anybody higher or lower? $40,000 to $60,000. So if you're looking to build a parking garage or a new parking lot, right? So think about what I just thought. Is this really the model we should be focusing on moving forward? Is this, right? Should we think about some other modes of transport? Public transit? Is there some other way that we do this and spending that much public treasure to park a vehicle? Anyway, these are interesting conversations. So anyway, I digress. It's gonna be like this all night. So focus, Dan. We have an hour and a half. All right, so that's where you're looking at your specific role on that board, and it depends, you're a transportation district. Is that what you said? Okay, so that's gonna be slightly different than the affordable housing, about the affordable housing. Affordable Housing Board, my guess is the Affordable Housing Board is the creation of the city to advise on affordable housing issues. They're probably kicking things to you, say, hey, think about this, maybe. This is things we want you to engage the community, look at partners, how do we come up with some creative solutions? That's not found in the Montana Code. Transportation district is. An advisory board is going to give advice to the governing body. Transportation district, my guess, is a administrative district that they have decision-making power. So advisory boards are going to advise a decision maker. A district, a special district, has administrative powers to make decisions on their own. So appointed, and you're as a board of 5, or board of 7, and so they're probably making decisions. I'm assuming are you advising or you're making decisions and advising at some point?
Advising decisions to the
Okay.
a board to the entity.
Okay, so there's ways to get up there. Yeah. Here's another example of an administrative district. It'd be if you've got a solid waste district. And so the solid waste district, they're a taxing authority, they can set fees, they buy land, so they're like a little mini government, a little local government with a very specific purpose. So they're a district, they have administrative powers to make decisions, and they're not advising anybody. So the county will create them, and because well, let me back up. Counties are a subdivision of state government. We create counties so that we can administer the state interest on local levels. Municipalities are a body corporate. Municipalities have more decision powers to govern within it. So the city of Missoula has more power to do things within their jurisdiction than the county commissioners have. County commissioners' purpose is to make sure that the state's interests are carried out across the state. That's why every part of the state is covered by a county. So public health, public safety, public transportation, weeds, all those things are kind of that county focus. And the community councils, bless their hearts. Anybody from community councils here? Online? Woo-hoo! Yeah. So those community councils advise the county commission on decisions that are affecting their little spot of ground. Fauna, rattlesnake, Rolo, East Missoula, Condon, Steely Lake, they're all community councils, all those little communities. All right, so what powers do we have with the powers of our board? The way you can find that out is the enabling legislation that created your board. So either if you're a county board or a city board, there was a resolution that was adopted by the county commission. And in that resolution, it identifies this is your purpose, this is how the size that you have, this is how long you're in terms of office, and then whatever your purpose is. That purpose is the box that you occupy. So in that, it's a resolution that was adopted at some point. And so if you don't have that resolution, I suggest go to the city clerk and say, I'd like the resolution that created XYZ board. And you can see that resolution. And in there, it's going to give a lot of the structure and framework of your board. And then it's going to give you a purpose. I think that's spelled right, purpose. The purpose of your board. And that's your space. That's your decision-making space. And then they're expecting you to work within that framework to be of advice and counsel to whatever the next group is. You might be a subcommittee that feeds into a committee that feeds to the commission or the council, depending on how you're organized, how many layers down you get. It seems Missoula you are a community that has a culture of committees and discussion, community dialogue. Let's have this conversation. And so you have a lot of these boards that are only found in Missoula. Right? So there's not a lot of other boards. You can look at other counties and say, how did you organize this? Oh, this is good. So what you do is find out what is our purpose, and that's important because that gives you the lane that you need to occupy. So as a board, you need to be focused unless the commission or whoever the legislative body that created you gives you a specific assignment. You got to kind of stay in that space. Yeah. Usually, that language is very broad and lofty. There's a lot of space you can operate in. But that's your patch you got to figure you're going to stay in there. When you get outside that purpose, that's when you start creating this mess, the mistakes, the problems, the conflict, the tension, right? And this is what we have in another metro city. I won't mention the name, but it's Helena. They have a real problem with their boards because they've kind of created them and then they just leave them. And the council hasn't had a really strong relationship between the boards. And there hasn't been a lot of direction provided for them, a framework to operate in. And so absent of that direction and purpose, what do you think they've done? Oh, they fill the void. They fill the void and they're doing all sorts of things. They started appointing each other to serve on different boards. It's like, yeah, dude, you don't have appointment power. That is not something you can have. So no, we can do that. Well, I'm going to appoint you to serve on that board. So a board is appointing people to serve on a board. That's not a thing. And so now the cities start realizing we've got a mess, and they're starting to reel that back in. Now that's going to go over well when people flex so much that they think this is our right, right? And so they're having a struggle there to try to get them back in the line and try to help them see. And so what they're looking at is, hey, maybe we need to spend some more time looking at this and giving them specific purpose and reevaluate each of the boards and say, okay, if we're going to have this board, what do we need today? Because it was built, created 30 years ago. They've been doing their own thing and no one's been paying attention to them. They're just creating chaos out here. So let's bring them back in. Here's your purpose. And then, so they're trying to tighten that up. It creates some friction. They've had some real challenges with some of these boards because they've gone beyond their purpose. That's a problem. So that's how you figure out what your power is. Are we an advisory board where we we provide advice and recommendations, or are we an administrative board where we are empowered by law to make decisions? That's usually, you'll find those administrative boards, we call them special district fire districts, right? Oh, back to subdivisions of government. I'm sorry. Make better notes. Subdivision of government. So rather than the legislature meeting every time a rural fire district needs to be created, and the legislator creating that rural fire district, the subdivision of government, what they've done is they said, look, we're going to delegate that authority to the counties. Those counties then can create these subdivisions of government. We give them that authority by law to then, when there's a need to provide a public service, you can create this special district for that specific purpose. And here's a framework to use it. That's what it says in the Montana Code. Here's the framework you use to create a rural fire district. It's scripted out what that looks like. There's other districts that they say, look, if you're making a board to address these specific issues, you can just create it. We're not going to give you a script on that. But there's others that have a script. Maybe more than you wanted to know, but that's how it's set up. So 7, 11, 10 is the area of the code that talks about special districts. In your packet, the last section on page 23, page 23. That's the general section in the Montana Code. So Title 7, Chapter 1, Part 2 describes boards. And this is the framework that your city or the county is using when they're creating a new board, or they should be. And there's a lot of binary questions, right? That's what they have to decide as they create this legislation, the resolution that creates your board. What's your role? What's your purpose? How big is the board? How many seats? How long are the terms of those seats? Are they be 2 years, 4 years? All that stuff is all answered here. So that's the framework that the city and county uses to create you. You can then go to the city and say, we want to see the resolution that created us, so we can identify our purpose and we know what our lane is we occupy. And you can then work as a team to make sure we're in that space. And if you find, the other thing is, If you're finding our board, there's something more that we can do, go back to the council or the council and say, hey, look, we would like to add this to our purpose. So you can have that conversation. There's more that we can do. Can we add this as we're finding, just so that you're in that space. The reason why I'm big on figuring out what your purpose is and sticking with it, because if there is a problem with your board and your board is acting outside of its defined purpose and you get sued, the first thing the attorneys that are going to be defending you are going to say, let me see the enabling legislation. Were you acting within your course and scope? If you were, the city has a responsibility and a legal duty to defend you. If you weren't, by law, they cannot defend you. So then you're on your own. So that's an important question to ask. Where's our lane? Because I don't want to put my assets in my house and my pickup truck and my dog on the line for doing a public service. But if I'm outside of my purpose, that becomes a problem. It's rare that becomes an issue. Mostly it's for elected officials that get a little entrepreneurial.
If your board's only a recommendation, can you still get sued based on recommendation? You're not a governing body.
You can get sued for about anything, but it may not stick on you, right? It's probably gonna go further up the chain, but they'll probably list you as what the originator. Now, one of the problems might be is that you could get sued for violating the open meeting law. And so the city will have to defend you. The city will take the hit on it, but it's because you made the mistake. That makes sense. So there's certain things that way. But if like a planning board, they'll sue, but the decision maker is going to be the council. So if they screw up, it's not, unless right hearing process or something flawed, and if they prove that there's a flawed process. But it won't come back on you because of. Yeah,
Recommend that we carry liability insurance.
the city has that for you, the city or county.
Like we said, if we do something that isn't,
Oh, just follow the law.
and if that, it's clear enough, that
I think so. It's not often that we see problematic boards getting sued. It's where the problem is usually with the elected officials. That they're acting outside course and scope. The city councils fire us an employee. That's not a thing, right? What is the role of the council? Make policies and laws. Who is responsible for operating the day-to-day operations? The executive. So if the council's suing, we're firing people, yeah, you're outside your scope. The city's gonna be on the hook for that.
We're then administrative or
Advisory.
advisory.
Yep, you're gonna be advisory, you're gonna be feeding that, so
Not administrative.
non-administrative, so administrative where you're making decisions on your own, like a fire district, where we're purchasing trucks, we're building buildings, we are an independent, we don't account to we don't account to the county, we don't account to the city, we are an independent. School district is another one, we are an independent elected board, we do our thing, we have rules and laws we gotta follow.
Advisory.
You're probably advisory, yeah, so the idea of advisory is we've got 60,000 people in town. How do we get them? So we are having those meetings on a specific topic, hearing the community's different ideas, and we're trying to pull all that in, the depth and breadth of ideas and perspectives that exist in our community, pull that in, and then try to frame that out into some sort of cohesive recommendation or a policy proposal. And it's so much easier because if you think about all the many different boards that are existing, they're offloading some of that specific groundwork to boards, and so those 12 members of council don't have. They can't.
If you advise the council to do something, then they,
And they don't.
Well, I don't know, they need like public support, right? To like want to do that thing.
that you're advising them.
So is it in good practice for boards to like market their advice and get public support so that when they advise it to the city council, then the city council's like, oh yeah, I've heard there's a lot of public support for that advice? Or is that out of line?
That helps, unless your council saying, no, we want you to be quiet and do your thing. Secret, no, that's not gonna happen, but yeah, so it's gonna help. And so the idea is, all the diverse issues and needs, the council meets what, once a month, once a week? You know, so the council's meeting once a week and they're looking at the big stuff like the budget and those big things and then all these smaller things. So yeah, if you can drive and get energy around a particular issue that you can bring forward, it's a whole lot easier. It's like, great, it's an easier thing for us to make these policy decisions when we know that we've got the community support. It's just a broader way in which they're facilitating this public conversation in the community. With 60,000 people, how do we do that? Well, we're gonna have a whole slug of boards that are gonna be reaching out. And not everybody in the community is gonna care about that particular issue, but those that are, they're gonna help shape and frame that policy proposal that may end up being adopted. Becomes that's how we roll in Missoula. So I help with the power of the boards. And you also had about agendas and those types of things with staff. But what's the relationship with staff? That's always kind of a tricky one as well. And I don't know if the city of Missoula has a policy to define some of that. But as an advisory board, so I think it's important to recognize that your advisory board does not have a responsibility. You don't have staff that are supporting you. And it may be driven by, culturally, but it may be driven by the staff who are going, you know, they've got a lot of stuff going on, but they're trying to pull together to make recommendations to the commission. And so by having an advisory board gives them a way in which they're engaging the public around some of these issues. So they may be putting things on the agenda saying, here's some things that we'd like to vet through you. We'd like you to facilitate this broader public conversation about this particular issue, that we can get that input that we can put into some sort of a policy proposal that goes through our internal process. So they may be driving that. What's helpful, and I think sometimes there's tension over who controls the agenda. How do we get things on the agenda? Because that's right. I don't necessarily want to devote my time as a volunteer to just carry out some administrative process for a department. That's not really what I'm here. I want to be doing more interesting things. And so you've got to have that conversation. And if you have a process that you don't feel is very accessible for your board to be able to be somewhat self-determined, right? There's a relationship here, right? There's going to be certain things you're going to have to do that are going to be internal to the organization, and there's going to be certain things you're going to want to do. So how do we get that on the agenda? Is this making sense? So my suggestion is create a policy. What is our policy and how we're going to have access to items on the agenda? So we're going to determine as a group this process. And so work with your staff, appointed staff member to say, hey, you know, if they're a gatekeeper and say, we're not happy with that, right? This is not how we want to spend our volunteer time, our discretionary effort. We want to have some things that we want to talk about. As long as the things you want to bring up and talk about are within your defined purpose. When you're proposing to do things outside of our scope, we want to talk about that too. It's like, we're not putting that on the agenda. Does that help? You had a list of other things too. Agenda.
It's mostly around this roles and responsibilities kind of issue between staff and sort of doing the meeting. But the other sort of sub point to that was working groups. I guess that could kind of flow from that.
So the first question about the roles, yeah, the roles.
Yeah.
I thought the last thing. Oh, that's weird.
happens.
It's not caught my mind. So the roles between the staff and the board, something good. Anyway, what was the other one? You had two there.
If there are working groups.
Working groups.
Right.
So,
Right.
let's go down that path real quick. Your packet. Page. Make sure I'm finding the right section I want. Okay, Look at page 5. So 23203, about the top third. So if you know how to read the Montana Code, 2 is Title 2. So let me never just answer a simple question. So it's gonna take you 20 minutes. So 1972, we adopted the Constitution. Right? So we have our 1889 Constitution, I'll say sucked. So we had to keep with that for like 70, 80 years. And so finally we say that sucks so bad, we got to do a new thing. Create new constitutions. That was one we adopted in 1972. When that's adopted, so when you think about a constitution, what's its purpose? Right? So if you think about a constitution, it's a high level document that defines the role of government in a particular jurisdiction, right? So the state, this is the purpose of government. This is its powers, its duties, its limitations, and here's some rights of the citizens. And so it's a very high level document. And I bring one with me. Ours in Montana isn't very big, 72 pages. By the way, this one doesn't mention railroads at all. Well, unlike the 1889 Constitution, it talked a lot about railroads. Anyway, it's done, it's gone. We've got a new one. So here's our new Constitution, right? So it's a very high level document. Now, when the Constitution's adopted, we all vote on it. It was proposed by a delegation of 100 people elected around the state. They came back, created this thing, and said, what do you think, folks? We all said, bueno, we like it. So then, once that's adopted, it goes to the legislature, and what do they do with it? They create the Montana Code Annotated. That's the state law. So we go from a 76-page document that fits in my back pocket to a set of books this big on a shelf. Right? So what they're doing is they're taking this, operationalizing it. So they might use a sentence, well, they actually do use a sentence in our Bill of Rights that says that you have citizens of Montana or the members of the public of Montana have a right to participate. Right? It's a single sentence, and it's at the top of the page. We'll cover here in a minute. And then it takes like 8 pages to define the responsibilities, role, and duty of government, all y'all, to make sure that you have a process and a framework to operate by and to ensure that we're meeting the constitutional obligations. Making sense? Then, because they only drill down so far on the operations of local government, it's up to us on the local level to create local policies. Right? That's why I said down here, right? This is the local policy. We're not going to make every single potential board idea that might exist out there. We're saying, no. Here's some specific boards we need to do specific things around the state, but then we're going to give you the ability, the authority to create whatever board you feel has a public purpose that you feel is meaningful. But if you're going to create that board, it's going to meet this framework, right? Then we're going to say now that board has to create its own policies of how we're going to operate in this space. So we are going to adopt our own bylaws, what we call rules of procedure or bylaws. This is when we meet, where we meet, this is how our agenda is going to be. And the beauty of bylaws is that you as a group or a board has made the decision how we're going to govern ourselves once. So you don't have to make it up every time you get a new board chair or a new person on the board, but we've already decided these are the rules by which we're going to follow as an organization. So day in and day out, this is what we're going to do. And as something comes up, a sticky point, well, let's sit down and figure out how we're going to solve this and put it in our bylaws. So we only have to make that decision once. Then that's why I say then your energy can be spent doing the cool stuff that you volunteered to do, not fighting over the governance process. That's going to be the quickest way that people like, I know. We've been yelling about bylaws for 2 years. I'm done. All right, now when we're trying to create our local policies and we read the law to frame out our policies based on what the law says, and the law is ambiguous. Any attorneys in the room? Love talking about the law. Attorneys in the room. So the law can sometimes be ambiguous, right?
No.
That's still clear. So when they use ambiguous language, we're kind of stuck. We're trying to make our local policy pretty clear, but what we're basing it on is ambiguous language. So we then go to the Montana Attorney General and say, hey, can you please interpret this section of law for us and bring clarity so we can be accurate in our policy? So they'll create an opinion, an AG opinion, which that opinion becomes the law of the land until either the legislature clarifies the law, fixes the ambiguous language, or through a lawsuit, the Montana Supreme Court says, this is how that law is to be interpreted. But until that happens or this happens, this is the law. Yes. Playing attorney on TV and it's paying off. Yes.
Where do the ARMs fall in that structure?
So the ARMs, the Administrative Rules of Montana, don't apply by and large to local governments. They're mostly to, for guidance for the state departments. And then we create our own local policies. Those are our own ARMs. There's a few instances where they kind of dip in and make reference to, and it's kind of a weird thing, but it's very rare. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a couple of places where it says, I think in purchasing procedures, some of that's kind of. Yeah, so the local government's arms or the ARM is your all right, so having all said that, all that, right? So now quickly, if you flip back to page 1, and that's the top of that page 1, there's 3 sentences there. That's the Article 2 of our Constitution, sections 8, 9, and 10. This is what I mentioned, that single sentence, like the right to participate. The public has a right to expect governmental agencies to afford such reasonable opportunity for citizen participation in the operation of the agency prior to final decision as may be provided by law. Which means, ding, 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 legislature, you need to create laws in the code that gives guidance to all levels of government and how they're going to allow the public to participate in the decision-making process. So this is the genesis of why each of your meetings has, I'm saying that in a proactive way, the affirmative wording, you have public comment on your agenda. Because you're satisfying the public's right to participate before you take final action. Even if our final action is, here's our final action, it's an advice to the next layer, right? So all along the line. Now, this is all to say, to answer your question about what was advisory groups or working groups. So your board creates a working group. Guess what? That's another subdivision of government. That working group also is carrying out a public function. That working group should also follow the same statutory expectations because they're carrying out the public's business and then feeding that back to you, who's then taking additional process and feeding it back to the next layer all the way to final action. But does that make sense? So the subdivisions of governments are still responsible for ensuring that the open meeting laws and citizen participation laws are still satisfied in that way, because it can unwind the whole process if you violated that constitutional right at a level way down here as it goes through the chain.
Is that the same for subcommittee?
So the reason why I say that, now let's come back to page 5. You had a question?
Just about like temporary versus permanent subcommittees?
Yeah, same.
Okay.
So look at numbers, so 23203, number 6 at the very bottom. Any committee or subcommittee appointed by a public body or an association described in subsection 2 for the purpose of conducting business that is within the jurisdiction of that agency is subject to the requirements of this section, i.e. you need to notice for meetings, allow public comment, have meeting minutes, all the things. Is that making sense? Some of you might be creating those, which is great. It's, how do we keep pressing it out? The idea is it's like a big old pyramid that the more that, we want to get more input that feeds through the final action. That's a great design. We just got to make sure that we're following the constitutional framework throughout that. Section 9 says the right to know, no person is deprived of the right to examine documents or to observe the deliberations of all public bodies. So committees and subcommittees and boards and all those, they're all public bodies. The public has a right to observe. Really, what I'd like to say is the public has a right to observe the legislative sausage being made. right? And all the seasonings that are included and all that stuff. So all the things that you're working on and planning for, right? All the things that you're looking at, they want to be part of that process and be available or be able to participate in it all the way up to the final agency action, right? Those subcommittees, all that. And you've got a great example that, so, I love hanging out in places like Missoula because you folks have plowed the road for the rest of the state. Billings is better than you because they've got a whole lot more precedent-setting lawsuits that they've done over the years to say, well, let's just try this. And then they get sued and it's like, oh, this is how the law really works. The Supreme Court comes out. But I think here you had, your school district was wanting to shut down a school. And they had a subcommittee that was going to work out a ranking system to determine which of all the schools were going to shut down. And they literally did this in someone's basement. And when they came out and said, well, here's our ranking, this is what we decided, and this is what we're proposing. And all the public saying, well, what the heck? When did you have that? When was this discussion? When was the discussion held that we could participate in when you're determining the ranking and how you're going to determine all that stuff, you know? So, yeah. So the Supreme Court said, yeah, that's not a thing. And so they said, you got to stop the process and start it all over again. And you got to be open and transparent so the public can participate and weigh in. Do you think it's important for me as a parent to be able to weigh in on what criteria you're using to determine whether we're going to keep a school open or not? I have a right to. So again, that's not efficient. Efficient is we're just going to make the decision. You know, it's not designed to be efficient, as was mentioned. Did I talk about that? Or is it another meeting? It's not designed to be efficient. But so, you know what you're saying. It's not designed to be efficient. I do this question. I can't remember what I said to you. So it's deliberative, right? And so we're working through that. There are 60,000 people we got to hear from. What are your thoughts? We're going to give them ample opportunity to engage. If they choose not to, that's fine. But it's not because you didn't know. We noticed it consistently. We allowed you to participate. Right, so at the end of the day, you say, this is a pretty good outcome. We've done all this on our part to allow them to engage and participate.
Government is not designed to be efficient
Exactly.
by purpose.
By purpose, intentionally.
Yeah.
So that's why when you know, it's like, we get people that are elected, they're gonna run this state like a business. It's like, well, yeah, go ahead, but you're gonna violate a whole bunch of stuff.
We could use some public education about that.
Don't get me started, brother.
Now I'm too late.
Can you talk about how, that all applies to, like, if the board wants to,
Talk about executive meeting.
Executive session?
Session. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan, do you mind repeating the question too when it's asked? That might help with the microphone. Do you mind just repeating the questions when
I
it's
still
asked?
did that. Remind me, just again, repeat that. Yeah. All right. Now, I know some of you in the room, it's just gonna drive you nuts if that's true. You can get over that frustration. So finishing out that number 9, that's section 9 of the Constitution, there on page 1. No person shall be deprived of the right to examine documents or to observe the deliberations of all public bodies or agencies of state government and its subdivisions, i.e. all y'all, except in the case in which the demand of individual privacy clearly exceeds the merits of public disclosure. So we started the assumption everything we do is going to be in the open to the public, except when there's an individual privacy interest. We have to weigh that privacy interest against the public's right to know. The next one, the right of privacy. So the right of individual privacy, right? So it's not a corporation, it's an individual. Right of individual privacy is essential to the well-being of a free society and shall not be infringed without the showing of a compelling state interest. So that's the balancing act. So when you're in a meeting, we're going to close the meeting, it's going to be for a privacy issue, and we're trying to balance that privacy issue against the public's right to know. 2 constitutional provisions that we've got to balance. At the end of that meeting, someone's constitutional rights going to be violated.
you
Right.
can say that, you know, I don't care, and my privacy doesn't matter.
I waive my privacy. So now turn to page 5.
But if there isn't a privacy matter, there shouldn't be an executive session.
Correct. So it's spelled out in the law. So we not 5. Oops, yeah. So if you look on again back that 23203. So section 1 says all meetings of governmental bodies, boards, bureaus, commissions, all that supported in whole or in part by public funds, including the Supreme Court, must be open to the public. That's the starting point. Everything's open to the public. Drop down to number 3, the presiding officer. Anyone in the room is the presiding officer of your board? Okay. So the presiding officer of your board, right? So the presiding officer of any meeting may close the meeting during the time the discussion. So the discussion, when we're discussing it, they don't say act, discussing, discussion relates to a matter of individual privacy, and then if and only if the presiding officer determines the demand of individual privacy clearly exceeds the merits of public disclosure. The right of individual privacy may be waived by the individual about whom the discussion pertains, and in that event, the meeting must be open. So in your case, so if library board, they have an employee. That employee is the library director. That director works under the supervision of the board. So the board does a performance evaluation of their employee once a year. With me on that? We'll just say once a year. And so what the board chair could do in that case would go to the library director and say, as you know, your performance evaluation is coming up. So much I need to tell you. As you know, your performance evaluation is coming up, and all of our meetings are open to the public. You may feel that this evaluation is private, and if you'd like to request the meeting be closed, then we'll take that under advisement, right? So it's still the chair's decision. Library director says, yeah, I'd like to exercise my right to privacy and request the meeting be closed. I concur as the library board chair, and we're going to close the meeting. During the time we're discussing the performance evaluation, when it's time to make a decision about contract extension or whatever, raise, bonus, all that stuff, you open the meeting and take that final action on that matter during open meeting. Why do we do that? What has to happen before you make final action?
Public comment.
Public comment, right? So we're not going to violate 2 constitutional rights inside that closed meeting, just the one. So we're going to open it back up and make our final action. So there was a thing I was going to say. Yeah. Oh, and you're exercising that right? So that person, and I'm always leery when I get calls from clerks or other employees saying, oh, the county commission or the whatever, they had a closed meeting last night to talk about. It's like, well, they didn't talk to you ahead of time. No, I don't think they necessarily have to, but I think it would be helpful if they said, look, so they have at least the opportunity to exercise, you have an opportunity to exercise your right to privacy. You may want to waive that right. I'll say superintendents of school at the city managers, if they sometimes get cross-threaded with their employee agency, the board, we had one city manager that the chair and a couple of the city council members didn't like the tone of the manager's emails. So they wanted to have a closed meeting to discuss his emails. They said, that's fine, but I waive my right to privacy. They said, well, we want to talk about it in private. I said, well, I want to have that open to the public. I think the public should hear what you have to say about the tone of my emails. They decided not to bring that up. Right, so it can sometimes be used as a strategy. I'm waiving that right, so now that's all open. Now, the other thing I'll just say is, and it may not apply to any of you, but it's interesting to just start thinking about, is not everyone is treated equal in this system. There are certain people in our world that we give more trust in their judgment, i.e. police officers. Police officers, because of the level of trust that we're placing upon them to make and exercise discretion and judgment, they have less of an expectation of privacy. Does that make sense? I'm giving you a gun and a badge. You can go around violating people's constitutional rights up to the point of death. I want to make sure you're making good decisions. If you're not making good decisions, I think the public has, so the argument is the public has a right to know. So remember what happened in Billings a while back? They had 4 or 5 officers that got swirled up in some sort of a controversial bad decision making on these officers' parts. It was silly. They're having sex and on duty with people. It was just a weird thing. And of course, salacious, and we all want to hear who these folks are. So, but it came down. They had to go to the court and say, okay, where is the balance of privacy here? And the court ruled that's given the level of trust that they have and the amount of judgment or our trust in their judgment. They have less of an expectation of privacy, therefore their names could be released in the newspaper, who these officers were. Right? Now, 6 months earlier, they had some people in the basement, the IT guys in the basement, dudes in the basement, what do you think they're gonna be looking at in downtime? So there's a policy with the city, no personal use and, no doing of pornographic material, blah, 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 in their policy. Apparently, these guys were caught doing that. And they're written up, administratively disciplined. Somehow the newspaper found out that this was happening, and the newspapers requested the names of those individuals. And they went to the court, and the court said, no, there is no expectation of trust placed by the public on these individuals. They're employees that are in the bigger cog of the system, that we don't care about their exercising of their discretion that they're using in their jobs, unlike a police officer, right? There's a difference in how we view those positions. So in that case, those names could be withheld from the public's right to know. A different scenario, different circumstance. School teachers would be on that side more on the police officer side versus, the school janitor, right? So there's not everyone's created equal, I guess is my point. Lots of words to say that.
I am understanding, say that, all personnel matters automatically are not private, or are all personnel matters private?
Yeah, so I would start at that point of having the discussion, if this is the personnel matter. So the Supreme Court has identified about 6 things that would be considered private. Personnel files, IQ tests, medical issues, military records, family issues, drug and alcohol issues. I think that might be the 6. I don't know if you know of any others. I don't know if this is the space you hang out in, but that's kind of where it's at. So we had a big conversation the other day with another town about water. If I'm delinquent in my water, is that public information? That's well, yeah. It's not one of the 6 things, and it's a public system. We're all buying into it. If you're not paying your rates, I got to pay more, right? So yeah, that's not private. So taxes, if you're not paying your taxes, the county can publish a list of all the scoffs that aren't paying their taxes. I mean, say, oh yeah, we could shame, publicly shame them into you're part of the system, right? We all got to pay in to get the things we've got. And if you're not, then I got to pay more because I want to have a nice paved street with that on potholes. If you're not kicking in, then it's more on me. So those things aren't considered private. But so back to your question about personnel. So if you're going to have a personnel conversation, I would first talk to whoever your legal counsel is and say, does this meet the balancing test? So anytime you're going to have a discussion and you're contemplating closing the meeting, get legal counsel. Because like I said, it's not one size fits all. So you got to make sure you're balancing that. And the other question is this within our purview? Should we as a board be dealing with personnel issues? My guess is you're not giving any supervision or evaluation to staff. It's not your purview. You're an advisory about these issues, not advising on the staff. So that'd be one of those mistakes, right? The world stepping out of bounds. This is the problem they're having in that unnamed city that I was mentioning earlier, that they were all upset. They were trying to direct staff. And they're like, yeah, you can't direct staff. That's not your role unless it specifically states in your purpose that you're directing staff. Right? Fair board doesn't necessarily direct. They're advising the fair director and the fair staff, but they're advisory to them. And then they take their input and advice, and then they'll take another advisement and decide how to use that. So in some ways, that's a tension there. If you as a board member don't feel like you're being heard and that your contributions are relevant, are you going to continue volunteering? Probably not. Right? So there's that balance. So if they're not being responsive, so but you can't also expect the board to govern or to guide that whole department either. So you got to find that space that where is enough to keep the board engaged and feeling valued and that we're taking your input seriously, but also not so far that you're overstepping and directing us to do stuff. 6 things that have to happen in order to have a legal meeting.
Found it.
So then I'm saying a legal meeting, right? Because you got a meeting, doesn't necessarily mean it's legal. Oh, the other thing I was going to say. Why Why is the library board as a board meeting to provide performance evaluation of the staff member, the director? What power do you have as an individual board member?
Individual, but as a group.
Right. So as an individual, you have no power. As a group in a legal meeting, that's where your power comes from, and your power is a vote. You can persuade, and then you make a decision, my vote, that's the power I have. So that's where I say, like in the library board, you can't say, well, we're just gonna have the director or the library chair be the supervisor by themselves of the library director. Because library board chair doesn't have any power. Right? And the board can't delegate their authority to that one individual. That's why you're a board. So the board is the one that's going to have that conversation with the library director, their employee. Right? So it's different if you had a mayor and a city council. The mayor is the one that's going to be doing all the day-to-day operations, and HR is responsible for all that happening in the city of Missoula. So they don't have to kick things over to the city council to discuss a disciplinary action of a department head. Like, if that's not a policy-making decision, you already made the policy. Your role was making the HR policy. That's your role. This is how we want our staff to be governed. Then it gets kicked over to the executive branch, and they're going to implement that policy. They don't need to come back and say, may we discipline this employee? No, that's not something that the council needs to deal with. It's an operations thing, not a legislative thing. Does that make any sense? So it's that separation of powers. And this is where you get some of those mistakes where we bleed those and they start running together and we're not understanding we have a specific lane. So if you're on a library board and you're trying to dictate day-to-day operations and tell staff what to do, you're overstepping your bound. You are the policy making, big picture stuff. It's a day-to-day operations can be the library director's role.
So then does the board have collective power to make decisions? Is that, but not individual power to make those decisions, but they
Right.
have some degree of power.
Yes, so the power comes when you're in a legal meeting is where you have that power. And we're satisfying all the obligations of the Constitution and the law, saying, okay, we're in this setting, we make a decision, that carries the weight collectively.
And they vote on it.
And they vote on it. And that's why we have meeting minutes, wherever that came from, the meeting minutes, all those things. So it's all tied in together. That shows that record of what is our decision making. So back to, I'm giving away some of my answers. Woohoo! So legal meeting. 6 things are required for a legal meeting. Let's see if we can make the list.
Notice.
Noticed.
Agenda.
Agenda. Yes.
Members, quorum.
Okay.
Agenda,
Yeah.
public.
Anybody guessing online? They're making dinner.
Pretty
I just listen to this in the background.
Approval of the last meeting's minutes.
No, we'll just make minutes. Yeah, minutes, which we don't have up here, minutes. Now, the last one, you're likely not gonna get, so let's turn, because it's in the code here, on page 5. I think, no, not 5. No, it is 5, I'm sorry. So top of page 5, 23202, meeting defined. As used in this part, meeting means the convening of a quorum, the constituent membership. So we got a quorum. Public agency or an association, whether corporal or by means of electronic equipment. Corporal meaning what? In person. So whether in person or connected electronically. 2, hear, discuss, or act. Now, I'm making a big old fuss over the word or. Why am I making a fuss over the word or?
You don't have to do everything.
Any one of those 3, if there is a quorum present and you're doing any one of those 3 things, you're having a meeting. Either in person or connected electronically. So if you're texting back and forth, and there's a quorum of you on a text thread, are you having a meeting? And you're talking about something within your jurisdiction. Yeah. And if that's happening, then it needs to be noticed. You need to have an agenda. You need to allow public comment and minutes taken. So that's why I say a legal meeting. You can have a meeting where a quorum is hearing, discussing, or acting, but it's not meeting the criteria, constitutional statutory criteria for a legal meeting. So my point being is be careful when you're emailing back and forth or texting back and forth, or all of you are engaging on Facebook. As a board, a quorum of the board is dialoguing about an issue, affordable housing on Facebook as a quorum, and they're engaging. You have inadvertently, this is what makes it really a pain in the butt. Because you're by volunteering to serve on the board, you're also restricting my ability to engage as I normally could have. Because I'm playing a different role in society. It's a special, unique role that I'm playing. And as advisory capacity, right? So you have an outsized voice from everyone else. So with that, you're in a different role. Rather than engaging in this broader discussion, I've got to be stepping back and listening to that and trying to bring that together into some sort of a cohesive policy proposal or advice to the governing body. So you're shifted your role in that. So when you're elected or appointed, that's you got to think about how am I engaging and that electronic thing. Now, do people care? Not until it becomes really important. That's better. So you just want to be careful on these three things. You can, 2 county commissioners creates a quorum, right? Bummer. I was talking to some commissioners the other day and said, yeah, I go to the basketball game, the high school basketball game. I sit on this side of the bleachers. The other commissioner sits on the other side of the bleacher. They still get flack from the community. It's like, oh, there are 2 in the room. That's a quorum. I said, yeah, that's a quorum, but they're not doing this. Right? So just become a quorum. You can all go to church, the same church. Just don't talk about public business. Right? The classic, I say, you got 3 members of your board are sitting out at the football game talking about hunting or whatever, talking about the game. Some member of the public comes up and says, hey, I want to talk to you about that transportation thing that's going on. And you say, not in, I'm going to go get popcorn. Walk away and break the quorum. Or say, hey, you know what? We've got a way in which you can communicate to us. We meet next Thursday at 6 o'clock down at the transportation building. Come on down and share your thoughts. But now we want to be here and enjoy the football game, right? Come up with language, whatever you need to, but just figure out, we don't want to hear from the public on something when there's a quorum present if we're not already talking about it. All these things to be in place.
So I think the hear, discuss, and act is where people get tripped up on what needs to go in the minutes.
Oh, yes.
Because act is clear what happened, if there was a vote taken, but how much of the capturing of the hearing and discussing you have to do.
Excellent. So let's turn, well, let's go to the bottom of page 5. So 2.3.2.12 is the section that deals with minutes. Appropriate minutes of all meetings required in 2.3.203, which we cover both of those. To be open, so all meetings that to be open must be kept and must be available for inspection by the public. So the public again have the right to observe your deliberations, and what was the other word that you used? Examine documents. Right, so you need to create the documents, the record. Now, I'm sure the commission, the Missoula Council, City Council has probably said, look, we're going to do this next part. If an audio recording of a meeting is made and designated as official, the recording constitutes the official record of the meeting. If the recording is made, a written record of the meeting must also be made and must include the information specified in subsection 2. So I'm sure the city has a very complicated system by which they're recording, they're projecting, and a lot of the metro cities and counties do that. Typically, boards don't adopt that position. We are going to have the software necessary to meet that requirement of the law, because it goes down further and it gives more criteria. Number 4. Anytime the presiding officer, no, that's not it. Oh, number 3, if the meetings are recorded and designated as the official, the log and timestamp for each of the main agenda items is required for the purpose of providing assistance to the public to access that portion of the meeting. So my guess is you folks aren't doing it, and I would recommend you don't do it. Just keep doing the traditional. We're gonna have a written record of our meeting, and that's gonna be our final thing. We're gonna submit that within the chain for public records management. So what is it that we need on our records? So look on the bottom, the top of page 6, the date, time, and place of the meeting. The list of individual members of the public body who were in attendance. So that's typically, it's like, these are the 5 board members or 3 board members, whoever who's here. It is, some jurisdictions will keep track of the members of the public who are also participating. They'll have a sign-in sheet when they come. It's not required, but it's usually as an aid for the person who's making the minutes so that they can verify or connect people to their comments if they want to capture those comments in participation in the meeting. They know who was there. And then it says the substance of all matters proposed, discussed, or decided, right? So the substance of these 3 things needs to be included in the minutes. So what is substance? I would say substance, it's more than action items or action minutes, which is just motion, action, motion, action, motion, action. Right? It's not that, and it's not verbatim, which is every word uttered, we're going to capture in our minutes. We're going to have 42 pages of minutes after each meeting, and our admin support is going to spend 2 weeks transcribing that meeting. That's not what we wanted. So basically what we're looking for is something in the middle. What's the context? And what was the discussion? Just the context of the discussion that led to that action. Right? Not necessarily Joe said this, Sally said that, Bob said this, Tim was crying by the end of the meeting. We don't need any of that. But we just need enough. It's like, this is what was discussed. We had some thoughts this direction, and this is the way we went. If you're the minute taker of your board, think about what would I want to see in minutes 10 years from now that would give me insight about why we decided what we decided, what went into that. So I understand that there was, we had a choice, and these are the 2 things, and we decided this. Right? We weighed it out. So those are some of the things, and so enough context where you understand what happened, but not so much that it's verbatim or onerous, and not just action items where it's just motion action, like the substance, whatever that is. That's the best definition we've come up. Do you have suggestions that are any different? Okay.
We're actively revising our policies at the city, so.
All right.
Yeah.
And the thing, we've had some smaller boards like yours say, oh, we're just going to take advantage of that. We're going to adopt the timestamp, and we're going to record it, and that's going to be our official record. But the other thing, because they don't want to write the minutes. What was the other section? The other part of that section said, if you do this, you still have to make minutes consistent with number 2. So section 2, which, the substance of all things are discussed. So those are the things you need for a meeting. That's the context for the minutes. Public comment. Now, where was that? Right here, the public comment discussion. I've been doing this job for a long time. About 18 years now. Is that wrong? 16 or 17 years? It's this is the first year, the first time I started talking about in a serious way how to manage that public comment in a way that you've stepped over the line as the public. It seems like we've become far less civil since COVID. And people feel emboldened just to do and say and behave however they want. I often want to say to some of the folks that are unruly in our public meetings, like, do you act like that at church? Would you expect your children in school to behave the way you're behaving here? So why do you think it would be appropriate here where we come together to mediate our differences as a community? This is the place where we come to the public square and talk about these important issues. So can we do it in a civil way? So what does that look like? So we are encouraging people to start creating ground rules and define expectations in 2 sets. A set of ground rules and expectations for behavior for the public when they're engaging the board. And then a set of ground rules and expectations for board members conducting business with board members. So how do we as a board are going to conduct ourselves, and what is our expectation for the public when they come? So if we're not defining the expectations for how people are going to behave in our meeting, they're likely going to show up however they want, they're going to do whatever they want. And you have no recourse to say, hey, no, look, we've decided, we've determined this is the standard of behavior. I'm less concerned about the words you say than I am how you say it. Right? So you've got the ability to say what you want to say, but you can't use swear words. Now I'm going to say, so the Ninth Circuit Court, which is we are under their jurisdiction, has determined that public meetings they're a limited public forum. They have identified multiple layers of public forums. An open forum is like the city park or the city street. You can say and do pretty much what you want to do and say. Right? That's where we have neo-Nazis marching in parks, because that is that space we reserve for that type of speech. Right? But then we narrow some of that down. We have different societal expectations in different contexts. So they said that a public meeting is considered a limited public forum where you can limit the Constitution allows you to limit the time, the place, the manner of public speech. So that's where, but you have to adopt rules and expectations of this is how we want to conduct our meetings. This making sense? So you can say in your rules of procedure, we're going to allow members of the public to have 3 minutes or 5 minutes, no less than 3, but 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes for public comment. You need to hold them accountable to that. Everybody throughout. I was just in Whitefish. Who was it asked a question about nice? Yeah, I was in Whitefish. They have a sand, what are those sand things? Yeah, it's this big. So the mayor just
3 minutes.
2 minutes, go. So I don't know what happens when someone only does their comments for a minute. They just stand around and watch the sand and go through. All right, we're next. What's up next? But or electronic thing, but where you say, here, you got 3 minutes. The other thing I would recommend. The other thing I'd recommend is on your agenda, the back side, print those ground rules. Board chairs, have a script at the beginning of each meeting. Lean forward in your chair, smile, and say, thanks for being here. We really appreciate you coming and participating. We're eager to hear what you have to say. I want to bring your attention to the back of our agenda where we have our set of ground rules. This is how we've decided that the best way for us to conduct business and to hear, what everyone has to say. So we'll just quickly review those.
Dan, I have a question from online.
What's that?
I have a
Good.
Joanne who has a question online. Joanne, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Sure, thank you. My question is about the agendas for our county board have times that go down the column leftmost as to when we're going to be addressing different things. Some of our meetings get done very quickly, and if a member of the public wanted to show up for, say, the last public comment period, we've already adjourned and left. Is this a problem, and do we need to have times on our agenda?
You don't have to have, good question. Thank you, Joanne. You don't have to put times, that's at your discretion. If you feel it would be a useful aid in your engagement with the citizens so they know how to engage and participate, that might be helpful. So it's not required, but anything that you can do that would enhance that relationship between the public and the board. If, by the way, if you look on page 1, and you guys, do they have the electronic version of this? I'll read that. So on page 1, public participation 23103, it says each agency shall develop procedures, i.e. bylaws, rules of procedure, develop procedures for encouraging and permitting the public to participate in the agency's decisions that are of significant interest to the public. So you have an expectation to permit them and encourage them to participate. The next line says the procedures must ensure adequate notice, right? Adequate notice, we had that on our list. And assist public participation before final agency action is taken that is of significant interest to the public. So you have two expectations, both to encourage and assist the public to participate. So if you feel by adding those times to inform the public, it's like, we think this needs to be done in a half hour. If you're not here at the top of the hour, you may not be able to participate. Right? There's no obligation for us to hang out here for an hour. And we'll talk about in a minute, the public comment, where to place that in your agenda through the process so that you're ensuring that you're meeting that constitutional requirement of the public's ability to comment prior to final agency action, and also making it clear for the public when they, how to show up and how to engage, right? Because your purpose there is to facilitate this engagement of the public to create the policy to feed it up the chain for the decision-making process. So being open and being flexible for that, I think, is going to be important. Did that help, Joanne?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Yeah, lots of words kind of there, but whatever. Yeah, no, I'm good. Yeah, so, and maybe as I keep talking, it might help some more. Another question? Yeah.
Sorry, one question I have, I've seen this at the state legislature in committees where they'll have a committee chair, maybe there's a very contentious bill hearing, and it comes time for public comment, and they'll say, we're gonna do 30 minutes of public comment. And at the end of that 30 minutes, if there's a lot of people who are providing public comment, they'll say, just come up to the microphone and state whether you're for or against it. And that's how they sort of stick to their agenda and make sure the meeting doesn't go on into the night. That seems like it could run contrary to parts of the state law. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no one's pressed them on it. You want to slow this legislature down from passing 1,500 bills in 90 days? You think we're not adequately informed? We're not adequately participating? I got to slow down. Listen. But yeah, I don't think we're adequately informed. I don't think we're able to participate at a meaningful level. I bet if someone were to sue the legislature saying, I feel like my constitutional right has been compromised because I was not adequately noticed and I wasn't allowed an opportunity to participate. Your expectation for notice on the local level is 48 hours. Why is it the legislature at 10 o'clock at night saying, this is what we're hearing on at 8 in the morning? And then we're going to give you, just tell me whether you're for it or against it. I don't think that's how, and the Constitution does not differentiate between, or their law differentiates saying, oh, here's a different set of rules for the legislature. So I wouldn't, there are only a few things I would say that use the legislature as a model. And one is how their chairs are trained to engage with public comment. All comment comes to the chair. All discussion is discussion to the chair. So it really reduces the temperature and the heat that might be created between legislators. Because if I've got everything's going through the chair, I guess, Mr. Chair recognizes so-and-so, chair, and they talk to the chair. And say, they may say, my colleagues might think this, but I'm talking to the chair. So it's less contentious than looking at you and saying, well, golly, you know, and that's where on our local level, we usually digress and we get into these very personal, and it gets a little messy. So I was working with a community that has a council member that is problematic, is out of step with the other, that's 5 members. So out of step with the other 4 commissioners. And is escalating, and which is requiring the mayor to step in and have a more formal, structured operating. And he said, but that's not our style. We're more of a relaxed, accessible. We want to have conversations rather than get really formal. I said, well, how's it working for you? Right? It works until it doesn't. When it doesn't, you got to figure out a way to make it work again. And so you're going to have to make it more formal. Have structure, have rules, have expectations, and then you have that space. Yeah, you can speak, but then you're going to speak this way. So we're going to reduce the heat in the room and the friction in the room by the way we've structured it. Because we want to hear what you're saying, but we don't want to have all the emotional baggage that comes with it. That help? Yeah. I was going to say back to the rules, the ground rules. The other thing, well, you walk into city. Last time I walked into city council chambers. So you walk through the door. I don't know if it's still there. A big old framed, and it has a list of here are the ground rules. If you're going to enter into the room, this is how you engage. This is the expectations for the public in participating in this process. So a big long list. So it's not uncommon for us to encourage you to have, stick it up on a flip chart if you want. Here's our 6 rules to the back of the agenda, right? And what you'll find is the public members will also help you manage the participation in the room. You got someone outburst, they might say, hey, Bob, knock it off. Rule number 3, come on, get with the program. Right, so they'll help you because you got some real, probably in your community, some real rule followers. I may not like it, but that's a rule, but you better follow it, right? So they'll help you keep that in line. And you'll bring the temperature down the room when you don't have people just hollering from the, from the seats somewhere else. Oh yeah, I was in another very small town, 160 people, and it's become a free-for-all. They show up at the city council meetings and, they can't even get to a report because the public's just peppered with questions, why this, blah, 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 blah. And they're trying to get a handle on that. So we've been working with another community. It's just a mess. This is why people have just been not being proper. The other part is the questions, right? There's not an obligation. You need to allow them an opportunity to comment. If they choose to use their time to ask questions, you have no obligation to respond to those questions. You can thank you for your comment. And oftentimes what they'll say as a script for the chair will say, if you have questions, please contact the chair or contact the library director or, with the city in this community says now they say, we're open 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. If you've got questions, come on in and we'll talk with you about those. We'll answer those questions. But this is a forum by which we need comment. So we won't be answering your questions. If you choose to ask questions, that's fine, but you don't expect an answer from us. So again, you're setting expectations for the public. So it's all fair. And I'm not frustrated now if I ask 10 questions, I'm not getting any answers. Now, I'm not saying don't answer questions, but just when you get down that, it quickly devolves into a debate. And then you've lost the meeting. Right? So you can decide how you want to do that. And if you get a lot of people coming with a lot of questions, that might be an indication for you that is there another forum, a different format that we can engage in public dialogue about these issues. So affordable housing, you got a bunch of people coming and want to talk about urban camping, and they're strong and passionate about it and saying, well, maybe this is a different way we can have this conversation than in this structure and format where we're sitting up at a dais and you've got to sit at a podium and you've got to say your 3 minutes. That may not be the most effective way of having this conversation. So you say, why don't we just have a public forum or a meeting, and we're going to sit around, we'll have tables set up and people can come and we'll talk to the tables, we'll have some sort of other dialogue that we can have that will generate input and participation from the public that then informs a more formal meeting. So there's a variety of ways you can do that. So don't think that the only way you can engage in the democratic process is only through this formal meeting process. But this is probably the end planning. If you're not doing your growth policy, probably tons of meetings in the community, tons of surveys, what do you want? We're hearing all that input and we're trying to frame that into some sort of a growth policy that's going to guide our decision making for the next 5 years. Right? You're not going to do that all in a meeting, you've got 3 minutes, right? You're going to kind of shed that structure with a more engaging, less formal process. You got 25 minutes, got another hand up?
I was just curious if there's more people to make comment than time allows, do you then have to create another opportunity?
Yeah, was it you folks, did I lose my? Oh, did you just have the city council had a meeting that lasted until like 2 in the morning?
We had 2 meetings.
Was that around urban camping and some of those?
Yes, they were both around urban camping and they were over 9 hours each.
Yeah. So to each their own, it's not wrong. You pick and choose how you want to do that. You could say, okay, at 10 o'clock, we're going to suspend this meeting. We're going to pick this up again tomorrow at 3 o'clock. But if you anticipate it like that, you say, okay, council, this is important. Did your parents ever say no good decisions are made after 10 o'clock at night? Right, and so it's no different, right? We're getting tired, we're getting cranky, and it's not a really effective way of conducting that public dialogue. So bake into the system, it's like, okay, we're gonna have multiples of these meetings and we're gonna hear what you have to say. Yeah, or find other ways to engage the public around input, so it doesn't have to be in that very structured formal way. Yeah, so I'm not a fan of, like you're saying, what the legislature does. Some do it. Dan Chemist, I think, used to do it here in Missoula a while back. He used to say, okay, how many are in favor of this issue? Okay, we're gonna take a 10-minute recess. You folks are in favor, why don't you all caucus, come up with a spokesperson? You've got 15 minutes to say your piece. Those that are against it, same thing. You guys get together, you know. So Dan Chemist, a master facilitator, he can do that stuff. I'm not saying it was right or proper, but they did it. So there might be ways in which you can do some of those things. But it's still, people still feel like they have a right to say, and they're not necessarily representing what I have to say. I'm gonna reserve the right to say what I want to say. And so that, going back to, sorry, the Ninth Circuit Court, how they've defined this as a limited public forum, so you can limit the amount of time, place, and the time, place, not necessarily what they're saying, but how they're saying it. So if you want to limit the ability of the public to stand on top of the table, swinging a sword, giving their public comment, you can do that, right? And it's not an infringement on their right of free speech. We're interested in what you have to say. Just put the sword away, get off the table, and let's talk about it. So you can limit that. You can limit swear words, you know, those types of things. You can limit the type of language you have, but not the substance. Yeah, the substance of what you're saying. So they even had a script for both the public side engaging, and then the same thing, you can limit how the board engages. They have a script that they came out in their ruling as well. That's what I don't have. I have it in a PowerPoint, just not. So I've got, when I do that, we do just meetings just on managing that. Now, let's quickly in the next 10 minutes to 20 minutes, talk about agendas. Where all this public comment, how do we have this flow, which might help? So kind of back to Joanne's question that she had earlier about, I can't remember a question, but it kind of related to this. So if we have our meeting agenda, people can see this, right? They're seeing it. So you need to allow the public an opportunity to make two types of comment. One, public comment on anything that's on the agenda. Okay. Two, comment on anything that's not on the agenda, but within your jurisdiction. So part of it, we want to hear what you have to say about the things that we're here to talk about. But it's also the other opportunity for them to engage the public agency on anything within their jurisdiction. How else would you know the interests, concerns, and desires of the public you serve without giving them a chance to engage you? So those two types of comments exist. But it doesn't tell you where to put them on the agenda. So that's at your discretion, that you can create in your local policy. You create in your policy and say, this is how our agenda is going to be constructed and how we're going to execute our agenda. So that way it's done once, and then every subsequent chairperson just follows that policy of how we create the agenda. If the chairperson wants to change the agenda, great, let's circle back as a board and we'll talk about updating our policy to reflect that change. Does that make sense? So we're just not making stuff up and go. We have rules in which we govern ourselves by. So two types, one has to be before agency action. So some may place public comment on agenda at the beginning of the meeting. Here's your opportunity. Here's our agenda. If you have anything you want to comment on these agenda items, here's your chance to make comment on it. The downside of that is there's no opportunity for them to gain context when you get to that agenda item. So they may be making public comment that's not very useful because they may not understand the depth, breadth, and complexity of the issue. They're just making something, it's like, yeah, great, but that really doesn't help us once we get to that agenda item and we have more context. So you can check the box and say, we did it, we gave you a chance to talk here. Not the most effective, but you could do it that way. You could also do public comment not on agenda, but within jurisdiction at the same time. Anything you want to talk about within our jurisdiction, now is your time to talk about it. Some will do it here, but most will do it down here at the bottom. Public comment not on agenda, but within jurisdiction. So it's your opportunity to say here at the end of the meeting, all right, now what else do you want to talk about? Now, the law says on page 1, 23103C, the agenda must include an item. So this is the state law. Put an item allowing public comment in any public matter that is not on the agenda of the meeting and that is within the jurisdiction of the agency conducting the meeting. However, the agency may not take action on any matter discussed unless specific notice of that matter is included on the agenda and public comment has been allowed on that matter. So if something comes up here, I would suggest you say, thanks for that. I think that's important. Board, I will entertain a motion that we place that on a future meeting agenda and not spend a lot of time dissecting it in that meeting because you want to have the public's input and participation in that. They don't know you that came up. So kick that down to the next meeting. Or the chair could just say, without objection from the board, I'll place this on the next meeting agenda. Or if the board chair is like, I'm not sure how you all feel about this, but I'll entertain a motion. Do you want this to go on and make it go through a formal vote? So again, the chair can say without objection, right? So if you don't want it to go on the next meeting, object to it. Say, okay, now let's just go for a formal vote then. So it's just an easy way for the chair to move things along without having tons of votes. So without your objection, I'll put on the meeting. Okay, question? Okay. Okay. All right, so we can bookend it with public comments. Typically, this one will go down here. And we could do that. The other option then is to do public comment with each agenda item. That's 1, 2, 3. How I would suggest you structure that, let's just say you're a fire district. Okay, I'd love to pick on fire districts. If your agenda is a fire district, it just says fire truck. As a member of that district, do you feel adequately noticed about what they're going to hear, discuss, or act on when the agenda just says fire truck? No. I would argue probably not. I don't know whether I should. What are you doing? Are you buying one? You selling one? You fixing it? You painting it? What's going on with the fire truck? You know, flat tires, new tires, what's going on? So if we were to put on the agenda, purchase a 2008 2.5 ton international pumper truck for $58,000, now I feel like I'm informed. And it's written in the form of a motion. Right? Motion 2, right? Or discussion on, right? So to discuss, and then the next thing is to move or to a motion 2. Right, so you're informing them. This is just discussion. We're not taking action on it. Right, so it's only intent, right? And so the idea is you're going to be talking about fire truck maybe for 6 months leading up to the final purchase. That is no way that a person can say I was not properly noticed that that's what they're going to spend $58,000. When you can show on your agenda, we've been talking about this for 6 months. Right, so now we have the fire truck all spelled out, kind of what we're intending to do. What I would suggest is you start out with an informational presentation. Now, it may be the staff member, it might be the fire chief, it might be someone, the engineer, it might be the architect, the attorney, whoever comes in and says, all right, here's what's going on. We've got da-da-da-da-da. We've been doing this, we've been doing that. We've been applying for grants and doing pancake breakfast. We've been raising funds. We think we're there now, that we can put a down payment, we can finance the rest with an intercapital, whatever. So they're going through and telling the story. This is important because if up here, you only allow public comment up here, and they read on Facebook, the fire district is buying some silly thing for $2 million and blah, 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 and, right? Because Facebook is certainly accurate. So on Facebook, let's talk about it. So you've got a room full of upset people because of something they read on Facebook. So if they show up at the meeting and you only allow them to comment here, what do you think they're being commented on? The crazy crap they heard on Facebook. So that's not helpful for them. Frustrates them. And when they're done making comment, what do they usually do? Get in their car and leave. Right? So if you say, hey, look, if you're here to talk about the fire truck, that's going to be on the agenda. We'll give you specific opportunity to comment at that point. So if you have something to say here, hold on to it. We'll talk about it there. Then it allows you to help them understand, here's the story behind it. We're spending $58,000. We're not raising taxes at all. We've done it through this means to get this thing, this is how it's happening. We traded in, whatever. You got the story there, and what's going to happen to the temperature in the room from all these angry people that showed up because they thought you're buying some silly thing. Temperature's going to go down. And then you're gonna have, after that, Q&A. That Q&A is between the board and the expert. You're asking questions, they're responding to the questions. If you're smart as a board, you're asking questions that the public is concerned about. So get that all clarified up front. Get it all out on the table. You mean it's this and not that? Even though they said it here, it's this, not that. Again, you're sure it's not this, it's that. Okay, I was with the school board, it's like, you mean we're not boiling children and eating them for breakfast? It's not that?
That was last month.
Yeah, yeah. All right, after the Q&A, then the next thing is public comment. Now we're gonna have public comment because we have enough context there. Everybody understand what the decision space is, where we're at with that. Then, let's go with pink. Draw a line here. That's not enough contrast, but anyway. So pink, blue, then we're gonna do the motion. Discussion. And action. Now, why did I draw the pink line? What does the pink line represent?
Public comment.
What's that?
Closed public comment.
Yeah, so we're closing, but why do we want, what about that? That is a significant shift in what's going on.
Because they have no action in the motion, discussion, or act. Public.
Yeah,
The
the
public has.
public process, this is the public process. And then we draw the line and say, okay, that process is over. Now it's the deliberative process here. Now, the system we've adopted is that we have delegated certain individuals to make decisions on our behalf. And you are some of those people that we've said, we trust you to make decisions on our behalf. As long as it's that agreement, as long as we've had a chance to inform and help shape that process. Thus the constitutional expectation to observe the deliberations and participate in the decision-making process. So we've satisfied that, now it's our turn. Now we're gonna take all that, we're gonna make the decision. So once you start figuring that out, it's helpful then to help the public understand that. You can frame that in a way as you're looking at your ground rules, right? That this is your opportunity to comment and this is the time for which you're gonna be able to comment. So we don't want just comments logged throughout and questions and unruly behavior. That's not a way in which we deliberate as a society. It's not a good decision-making process. So that could be a way in which you can manage that meeting, manage that public comment, have that all spelled out in your policies and your ground rules established, everybody reviews. It's really going to spark up that meeting process where people feel like they're being heard, they know how to participate, I know when to engage, I can say my piece. And it could be, hey, 3 minutes isn't enough. So at the beginning, before you start public comment, I'll entertain a motion to expand this from 3 minutes to 4 minutes. Second, okay, those in favor, right? So you make that change in real time if you feel that happens. The reason why I say don't go less than 3 is because our fear is if we go less than 3, somebody might push back on that and sue. And if that happens, my fear is that the Supreme Court is going to read that constitutional provision and say, yeah, I don't think you can limit the public's ability to participate. Then it becomes open mic night at your local board. Right? So come down, sing songs, read the Bible, read the whatever, right? They can do that because there's no way for you to stop them. Or give a framework, because right now there is no framework. You see what the law says. You need to allow them an opportunity to make comment. They don't say how much or in what way or style. That comes down to local level. Okay, what else we got here? Code of ethics. We have that in your packet. I hope, yes, page 13. So page 13 in your packet is the Montana Code of Ethics. And what that is, there's a couple sections where I really, the legislature should read about this last session. A person that reads a lot of the law, I have favorite sections. That's how nerdy I am. And they just mucked it up this last go round. So really our code of ethics is looking at the conflict between your private interest and your public duty. And they recognize the fact that all of us have a private interest. I come to the table with a private interest, but we don't want to put you in a position where your private interest is in conflict with your public duty. In that case, there's a way for you to remove yourself from that decision-making process, because we want the outcome to be resilient. And we don't want to have it brought under question that, oh, you're making decisions only to further your own private interests. So if you look there on 22101, the provisions of this part recognize that some actions are conflicts per se between public duty and private interest, while other actions may or may not pose such conflicts depending on the surrounding circumstances. What they're saying is that we recognize that some things may be a conflict of interest. And other things, depending on the surrounding circumstances, may not. And that's where we say there's a big E of ethics, which is the legal, right? You read this section of law and it legally defines this is a conflict. I have a private business interest. I can't make decisions about that on the public side that's going to impact my private business interest. Whether it's going to, whether I can hurt a competitor or help my chances in the marketplace. So we don't want to have people in that position to further their own private interests. So that's a big E thing. And then there's a little e. And this is where it's not legally, it's not defined in law saying it's against the law, but everyone feels very uncomfortable about it. And so you understand nepotism? The law, it's on, I don't know, page, whatever it is. There's a one pager about the nepotism law that says I can't hire, there's
There's a chart.
there's a chart too. I can't hire someone that's within the 4th degree of consanguinity or the 2nd degree of affinity. Consanguinity is a relationship by blood, affinity is a relationship by marriage. So you look at that chart and that red line, everything on the right, the left side of that red line is within the 4th degree. So I can't hire someone who's like a cousin, a grandparent, an uncle or aunt. They're too close. Right? So we have to draw a line in the sand and say, where does nepotism start and stop? Well, that's the line. Or affinity is a relationship by marriage, so it's the in-laws. Right? So given that scenario, I can't appoint someone that's an in-law or related by marriage. So if I were, so we had a situation where a public works director had a live-in girlfriend who has skills. There's a vacancy in the department. The live-in girlfriend applied for that position, was the most qualified, and now what should the city do? Should they offer the job to the public works director, who will be their direct supervisor, the position to the live-in girlfriend? Is it a big E or little E thing? It's a little E, right? Because what's the key? Marriage. They're not married. And we'll assume for the purposes of this scenario, they're not related within the 4th degree. So given that, right? So then it's a little E thing. Now, how's the public going to perceive that situation?
That's a biggie.
Yeah, they're going to be coming to me, that is wrong, it's inappropriate, this is nepotism. It's like, well, it's not legally defined nepotism. It is nepotism in a way, but it's not legally defined. So here's the problem, the conundrum that the city's placed in then. What if they're the most qualified, legally able to hire them, and they don't? Does that individual have a claim against the city for discrimination based on marriage? Yes. What if they do hire them, and the public is really pissed off at them, and they lose all sorts of public trust? So they're kind of stuck. No way is there a good outcome of this.
So how is it, say they hired him, hired her or him, whichever, and then they ended up getting married?
That wouldn't be a problem either, I don't think, because they didn't appoint them. So, oh, yeah, sorry. So what happens, let me just say this, what happens if they hire the person, so it's not a violation of nepotism, but they get married, subsequently get married? Now it creates a nepotism concern, but the way the wording of the law is that it's the hiring up. So it'd be the same thing if they got a person that was then hired to supervise, that was a new public works director came in and their wife was already working in it, or vice versa. The husband was, could go either way. Does that make sense?
5 minutes.
What's that? 5 minutes, yes, thank you. So does that help? Go ahead.
What about friends?
Friends, not this, yeah, doesn't mean, so it'd be a little E. So again, the political side of it is people will give you a lot of flack over it. Right? But it's not a big E. So I got a big email from guys concerned about how the city manager of the city of Bozeman, decoupled his relationship with the city and the severance and all that stuff. He says, I think that was a violation of the code of ethics. I just ignored it, but I want to time back and say, cite the law. Cite the part of the MCA that says what happened was a violation of the law. And then you've got a case and go pursue it. Just because you feel like, I don't like how it looked, I don't like how it did, it just makes me feel smarmy, that's fine. That's a little thing. It's not a violation of the law. Does that make any sense? So there is a law out there. We want to separate, so really what this is doing in that section of the code, it defines what are those relationships. We just came across one the other day that you can't engage in a substantial financial transaction with someone you supervise or inspect. Right? You can't take gifts of the ante. So you can't take gifts of a value of $100 or more that has two qualifiers that would tend to improperly influence you from deviating from your duties, your public duties, or that a reasonable person would think it would cause you to deviate. So it's not necessarily what I think. I might think, oh, I'm straight arrow. Go ahead and give me that $150 gift, but it's not going to influence me at all. That doesn't matter. It's what would a reasonable person on the outside looking in. So just think a jury of your peers. So a lot of that is spelled out. The nepotism. We got a whole other presentation and a handbook, I think, is on our website too, about the code of ethics. It kind of breaks it down in regular people speak. The part that I really liked, there was that section I read. Oh, let's see, what else we got here? Public comment, we covered that well enough. Requirements for something. Was that covered? We'll say it was.
Requirements for minutes.
For minutes? Do we cover that well enough? We got stuff, yeah. I'll say we did. I don't have anything else to say, so as far as I'm concerned,
It's
got it
done.
covered. Roles, responsibilities, staff, board, you feel better about it? Still kind of, it's one of those squishy areas that is negotiated and start with your policy first and work from there. And then figure that out. Mistakes, I can tell stories all day long. Is there anything else?
I'd love to hear them.
Yeah. I'll think on.
Save it for another time.
Yeah, out of time. Ethics, we did that. Meetings, we talked about how to, at least the agenda and how to conduct those. Ground rules. Ground rules would be very helpful. Here's the thing. No one shows up. We all get along. This is great. Best time to do it. Best time to create ground rules is when everybody's getting along. And sit back and say, hey, if we're to do this, let's write down what really works well for us. And that will become a canonized way in which we're going to conduct business. Because you're one appointment away from a disaster. Or one issue that shows up on Facebook, and now you got a room full of people. If you don't have a way by which you're going to rely upon a process that's written down, that I feel clear about roles and responsibilities and expectations, it's a mess. And when you're in that mess, it is really hard just to pull back and say, okay, we need to make rules. Like that community I was talking about that has a council member that is problematic, that isn't in alignment with the rest of the, and they're like, look, we like to be this informal group. And I said, well, it doesn't work for you anymore. That's why we're having 4 conversations this month about this issue. So you've got to formalize things. You've got to create some ground rules and expectations so they know how to behave. And when they're not, then you can say, look, you're violating the rules. You got to get back in line.
I know we have a hard stop at 5:30, but this is a quick question. What is our best resource if we're unclear in terms of how to proceed? If we've read through and we still might have a question, is there a place that we can find, other than your confusing website, to dig and try to find this? Who can we reach out to, or what's our best follow-up?
So I would connect with staff. Can you hear me now? So I would connect with staff, your staff liaison, and say, hey, can you help us navigate this? And that would be your entree. I don't want to have you jump right to the city attorney, but go through staff, and then they can navigate the internal operations of the city to come back with some guidance. So we provide a lot of technical assistance support to people like yourselves. I'll have to say, we just had one today say, hey, you got bylaws. We got sample bylaws on our website that you can, and I don't think we can put them in the, they're like 8 or 9 pages. But
So everyone is for that, and it has tabs covering every single. Yeah.
and the other thing is, and there may be an internal, like the city or the county might already have policy of how things are done. And so then you can say, okay, we're gonna refer to that policy that provides that guidance. So being policy rich in that, whatever you're going to need to help you be effective in what you do, I would say write it down and create that as a policy. So that you're not having to make it up all the time. If it's not written down, it's subject to the discretion of whoever's the loudest at that meeting. And it's easier to bring people in line. It makes your time more efficient and more effective when you're not spending a lot of time on process, but more on substance. And a lot of that's probably already been done by the city. Like I said, we've got a boilerplate set of bylaws that you can start with, and then you just, we have it on our website as a Word document, so you can download it and you can customize it to your specific board in your context. But it starts out with the framework that's what do we need to make sure that we're consistent with the law, the Constitution, and then you can mess it up from there. And then get legal counsel to review it before you adopt it. Yeah. Is that good?
Yeah, that's great.
All right, thanks. Hey, just thanks for your service. Thanks for your willingness to say yes. I'll help out. Other questions?